Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of The Blueprint, where we get inside the minds of people impacting our country and our world, including some of America's greatest business leaders. Innovation is the DNA of Rockefeller Capital Management, dating back to the family founder, John D. Rockefeller. We're fortunate to have many titans of industry in the Rockefeller community, and we want to find out what makes them tick. Motivations, best practices, managing the wealth that comes along with success. Today, we're pleased to have Katie Koch. She's the CEO of TCW Group, a leading global asset management firm. With a financial services career spanning more than 2 decades, Katie has been instrumental in driving growth and innovation at TCW. Her leadership and vision have positioned the company as a key player in the asset management space. Welcome, Katie.
It's amazing to be here.
So I always start these in the same place, which is because there's so many people who will watch this or are interested in your life and how one thing led to another. So let's start at the very beginning on how you got into the whole financial world.
So I started by graduating from the best university in the country, which is obviously the University of Notre Dame.
And so I just want to pause there. Jack Brennan's going to be watching. There you go, Jack. There's your call out. For all of our listeners, and many people in the Rockefeller ecosystem know this, but Jack is our lead director, longtime CEO of Vanguard, was the lead trustee at Notre Dame, and is probably the biggest fan, other than his wife, Kathy, who I should call out here, of Notre Dame and Notre Dame football.
Yeah, they're both amazing. She's terrific.
She's great.
I graduated from there, and I want to spend a minute on this because I want you to see what your perspective is. But at TCW, when we're hiring people that were where I was at that stage in life, just a fresh college grad, they seem so specific on what it is they want to do. Like we hire people and they don't just want to, they know not only do they want to do asset management, that they want to be in private credit and that they want to be in the distressed part of private credit.
I think this is generational. I see that everywhere as well. We see that in younger people that we hire. And I was kind of a big bucket person. I mean, maybe I want to be a management consultant or something, but the specificity and also them talking about the path. I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. And at this point, I'm going to do this. It's also planned. And I always say, look, life's going to come in and something's going to happen, and that's probably not all going to occur. But I hear you. I really do think that's the younger generations today. They know exactly what they want.
And so I was the opposite. The way I started into this industry is I just wanted to live in Chicago this summer with a boyfriend. That was all I was focused on when I got my first internship. And I went to this job fair, and that was back at the Jack at Notre Dame's campus, where they had all the little tables and the companies were represented. Yeah. And so I went in with this guy and I said to him, what's the best company to work for in business? I was a literature major, something I want to come back to. So I really didn't know a lot about finance, and my parents weren't. And
what year was this in school?
2002. I graduated in 2002. So this would have been like this 2001.
But your sophomore year, your junior year?
My junior year, because back then we didn't get our internships 5 years early, which everybody does.
This is another thing now. No, we fill our summer class. I'll say to my head of human capital, Michael Gabb, I've got somebody. He's like, well, that'll be for next year.
Yeah.
Because they everybody's so focused on these jobs, it keeps getting backed up.
I have some opinions on that. I think it's ultimately a disservice because when you hear this story, like I would have never ended up in this industry under that formula. But I said, so what's the best company in business? They said Goldman Sachs. Like, okay, so I went up to the Goldman Sachs table.
Having worked at Merrill and Morgan Stanley, I'm sitting here trying not to comment, but go ahead.
So remember, best university in the country, interviewing for the best company in the world. So I went up to the table, and I was a literature major. I had published things. I had a good GPA, so I had a good story. And as a literature major, I did know how to put a narrative forward. And I met the person at the table. I made a case for myself. I learned about the company. And long story short, I ended up getting the internship. And of course, since I was 12 at the time, basically, by the time I started, I'd already broken up with the boyfriend. But I got the summer internship at Goldman, and that went well. And I realized how much I didn't know, truly. And I'm not saying that out of false modesty. I was a literature major. I knew nothing about the world of capital markets or finance. I was able to get through the summer through hard work. And then I realized I really liked it. So I went back and I did an econ major, which I think we have in common.
Yeah, I was an econ major. Although I didn't know much about, like you, I didn't know much about the capital markets. I found out about investment banking like in my senior year of college. I took a course in corporate finance. Yeah. And again, that was different in those days as well. I mean, people know so much, young people know so much so early these days, and it's just not the case then.
And Colgate has, you went to Colgate.
I went to Colgate, yeah.
And that has this in common, and my background was liberal arts, and I think it ended up being such a big advantage because you read widely, you learn
100%.
How to write, you learn how to ask good questions, which is a big part of of investing. For me, since I had to do a lot of theses, you have to take lots of disparate pieces of information and put it together into a cogent, conclusion, which ends up being relevant for investing.
100%. I think it's great training in so many ways and just gives you a comfort with all sorts of different topics. I wouldn't trade that liberal arts, broad experience, literature major.
Yeah.
I actually look for that on resumes.
I think it's important, and especially the more we get into AI, like the ability to ask good questions is critical. That's what we say to our kids. We have 4 kids. When we drop them off at school in the morning, I shout out the door, ask good questions, because I feel like that's
I can see you
the
doing
only
that.
skill I do. I didn't know that's really going to be important when we live in this world of greater computerization.
Yeah, because you can pull up facts on anything so quickly.
But you still have to ask the right questions.
Exactly.
So that's it. It was basically the answer. The short answer is I got in accidentally.
So tell me about, so you had basically a 2-decade career at a fantastic firm, incredibly competitive firm. One of the things I give them credit for right through this day is the quality of the people that they hire. I mean, they still bring in really good people, and and the current CEO, who I know you know well and worked for, David Solomon, talks about the fact that they're in the intellectual capital, human capital game. They want the best people, which, by the way, I am, and you are as well. That's what drives both of our firms.
Yeah.
So tell me what it was like, that 2 decades at Goldman Sachs. Obviously you did really well. You wouldn't have been there for 2 decades.
So first, I just want to start by saying how grateful I am, because obviously they took a chance on me. As I already said, I wasn't super qualified for the job, and so I'll always feel for the rest of my life a lot of gratitude for that. And I got incredible training that's made it possible for me to now be a CEO. And so if I boil down some of the things I learned there, and then you had these experiences too at Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley, but at these companies, you get to learn how to manage people, problems, and process at massive scale. And that's central, obviously, to being able to lead a company. And so I got a lot of that. They were very good at moving people around if you were succeeding in your job, which ended up being a real advantage for me. So I was able to move countries. So I worked in the UK for almost a decade. And I was able to just start businesses from scratch within asset management, and also go to more mature businesses and think about their next stage of growth. So I was able to move around the world and also around the business a lot, which I think really helped build great skill sets. And then the final thing from an investing perspective, because obviously that's what I do now, lead an investing business, it is the place where because we were fundamental investors mostly in what I was involved with at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, and TCW is all active and largely fundamental investing, private and public markets. I did learn about risk in a great way because they have some of the best quantitative resources in the world. And so even though it was a fundamentally driven business, many of the ones I was focused on, I learned a lot and probably had a more sophisticated take on risk than other people, the unitization of risk, how to think about that. And then also the other lesson I learned a lot at Goldman, which is one of the most important lessons in this business, is really knowing your duration of capital. So those are important investment and risk lessons.
Having competed with them basically my whole career, I think those are things that I see in that company, including taking great talent and moving it around and having you get exposed to different things. And then risk management. I was president of Merrill during the crisis, and they did a great job through that time. I remember David Vinier was head of risk, and that's a firm that's always known its risks and does inculcate that in their people. So that sounds like a great path. But that path took you to, and I want to go back to mentors, and maybe we'll talk about the process of leaving Goldman, which I'm sure wasn't easy. But let's go to TCW.
Okay.
And TCW is a fantastic name that's been around a long time. 1971. 200 billion plus in assets today. But one of the things I know about you, having gotten to know you, is that you bring a kind of founder's sense of urgency. Yeah. And that's what we've done here. And we were close to a startup at Rockefeller 7.5 years ago. But you're bringing that to a firm that's been around for over 50 years. What has that been like, injecting, a kind of a refresh? Yeah. And that comes from, your personality and your drive to take a great name and make it even better. How's that been?
First of all, just on TCW, because people may be interested in this, as you mentioned, it's been around for over 50 years. It was founded by a guy named Robert Day, who's unfortunately passed away, but he is the scion of the Keck oil family, which was the largest. They ran Superior Oil, which was the largest independent oil and gas company in the U.S. until they sold it to Mobil in about 1984. And so he did something really unusual and impressive that I think would be of interest to your clients, which is that he is a second generation individual that went into a totally different area and launched and created and scaled a really successful business, which of course was asset management. So that's the heritage of the company.
I never knew that, because I've known TCW for so many years. That's really neat.
I actually had the chance to meet him when I started before he passed away, which was great. And it was a really special moment for me. And I think in the history of the company, I went to his beautiful house in Bel Air, got this great view of LA, and we had lunch together for an hour. And he told me about the starting of the business and gave me advice, which was really helpful, and I'm glad I got the chance to meet him. And so what you are exactly right. So obviously there's to be around for 50 years as an independent company, this is actually rare in the business of asset management.
Very few, right? Almost
very few.
We can count them on maybe Wellington, just a few though.
It's a small, rarefied group. So clearly they were doing a lot of things right. And at the heart of that was being privately held helps a lot, but very strong investment-led culture. And so I needed to preserve all of that, but there were parts of the platform that had to be modernized in terms of technology, operations, and putting more of a focus on alternatives, which we can talk about later. We've already been doing for 25 years, but we needed to make more investments in that business. So I like the comment that you made, though, about the urgency mindset, because we do have some of that. And there's two things that stand out to me of advice from people that I've brought to this job. The first one was from one of our clients, actually one of our largest clients. And as you know, one of the best parts of this business is clients and having these deep partnerships and relationships where you can be vulnerable with each other and ask for feedback and ask for advice. I don't know about you, but that's one of my favorite parts of this
100%.
job.
And the advice is, if you're comfortable being vulnerable and being okay with whatever the answer is, the advice is so much better and so much more impactful.
And so he and I sat down and he said, how's it going? And I said, it's great, but like some of these things are hard. Like it's hard to take these people that have been very successful doing this well and ask them to do things differently. And I don't want anyone to think I'm trying to hurt this culture that's been so successful over the long term. And he had this great advice for me, which is that you have to separate from people culture, which is values, from norms, which is the way that we do things. So we are going to have a great investment culture, continue to have that. It is also true that we may need to evolve away from the mutual fund, which has been around for 100 years, to something like an active ETF. And those are norms, like the way that we do business every day. And so that was a helpful framework that allowed me to kind of engage with people in ways that we could respect this heritage, but evolve for the future.
That's a really great distinction.
Yeah.
Because we have a very clear culture here, and we've worked hard, me, the leadership team, everybody, 1,600 people signing on to excellence in everything, but in a collaborative, collegial firm culture. But you still have to inject change. You still have to pivot. You still have to keep the bar high and have tension in the line. Yeah. That's the norms.
Yeah.
Things have to be done differently sometimes.
Right, because the industry is evolving, and you got to stay relevant
100%.
and products, and also the way you're investing. So that was very helpful. And then actually what you said reminded me of a conversation I had 2 weeks ago. I got to meet with a small group with Andy Jassy, who of course the CEO of Amazon. Someone asked him the question. This just really, I thought of this when you used the word urgency. They said, Amazon is always innovating, right? If you think about AWS, which is now one of the most valuable parts of the company, I mean, it started off selling books online, right? They've become and stayed one of the most valuable companies in the world with multiple lines of businesses. And
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The innovation to do that, though. Instead of just dominating the change that we just talked about in everybody's lives, cloud computing.
Yeah, they just can keep going into different vectors of growth. And so the person said, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you stay at the leading edge of innovation? How do you motivate people to do that? And he said that at Amazon, we really think one of the biggest threats is actually incumbency, is success itself, because it can breed complacency. And so he used this word, which I loved, which he said, we try and cultivate a mindset of insurgency, which is the first time I've heard that word outside of a military context. But that's the view that, like, we're on the ground, we're trying to do something hard, we're new to this, there's enemies out there that we have to know and overcome. And I just was like, oh, that's a really interesting word to just motivate people, that how hard it is to do new things, and that we have to keep coming in and do hard and new things every day, or we're not going to maintain ourselves.
That's fantastic, Katie. I'm going to borrow that, because that's what we have our 8th anniversary next March 1st. So, people could say to me, come on, you're only 8 years in, but I'm still looking for the insurgency in places to keep the sense of urgency and make sure, okay, what comes next? And no, we don't want to get comfortable over here. And that's what, in Amazon, what a great example, though, of a company hasn't been around that long, and they reinvented themselves again and again.
Yeah, and they're also do what you guys are very good at, which is they're putting always the client first. And that insurgency comes from like, how do I stay at the leading edge all the time of delivering for the client? So I thought that was very interesting, and really, I took that back. I'm taking that back and thinking about that with TCW. But the industries are competitive. The clients are rightfully demanding. We got to deliver for them, and that requires us to push ourselves and our people really hard.
Well, let's talk about the transition from investor, which you did at Goldman Sachs, to CEO.
Yeah.
So that was a step.
Yeah.
What caused you to do that? And obviously you wanted to lead. You wanted to lead a whole company. But what caused you to do that, and how has that transition been? Your days are very different. You can't be the CEO and be the investor. So just talk about all of that.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because one of the last job I had at Goldman was I ran the public equity business, and it was very large. And as a result, I had this incredible experience where I got to meet with the CEOs, really any CEOs that we kind of were invested with around the world, which was a lot of
biggest companies, biggest CEOs.
Biggest companies. And so I loved those conversations, and I learned a lot from them. And one thing that I probably didn't fully appreciate that now I know as a CEO is that we really talked a lot about strategy with them, which is important. Are you focused on the right growth vectors, as an example? And that is important to understand. Now that I've actually been a practitioner of it, I realize that execution is equally important. And people would look at that. Obviously, that comes through in the quarterly results, which we would watch, but there's a lot better questions that you can ask to make sure that someone's equally holding in their head the strategy with the ability to actually execute on that. And so that's the tension of what every day I have to do at TCW is what is the long-term strategy and how am I getting the team to get behind the daily execution? The other thing that you asked about coming to TCW, the other thing that I learned from those conversations was I would always ask them this one question, which is, what would you do differently if you were a private company? And it was so, first, there was a couple of revealing things. The first is it always made them excited to be asked that, which was revealing in and of itself. Like, I thought, wow, it might be more fun actually to run a private company. Like, that was a takeaway. And the second was the answers were always amazing about what it could really do to unlock enterprise value long term, but it would require some amount of investment, for example, or some type of disruption that would be really hard for the public markets to accept. And that really led me to think if I was going to go out and lead a company, I really wanted to do it in a private setting. And I think it's a massive competitive advantage for what I do, which is investing, because I think it's almost impossible to be a long-term oriented investor in a public company context. So those were takeaways for me from that. And then on why to leave Goldman and go do it, I like leadership, and I knew that. And I thought this is a way to be a leader with real impact because I would have the incredible opportunity to lead my own company. And my dad always had this quote that he gave me that leaders are people that they have to know the way, go the way, and show the way. And that is exhausting. You do it here every day too. But if you really love that and you find purpose in it, then you're going to find alignment with the things that you care about. And that is energizing.
And I have found it, and I'm sure you have, to be the most rewarding part of the career, despite the challenges and the fact that every morning it's the same thing. You've got to be at it, and you're leading these people, and you can't let them down. You're trying to make the right calls. Yeah. But it is incredibly rewarding. So you had it in the bloodstream early. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some examples from earlier in your life that shaped your leadership style and led you to where you are today? Because this is not something that happened late at Goldman Sachs. You're like, wait, let me lead. It's been, if we went back, we probably could trace a line through that, Katie Koch was eventually going to do this. What are some of the things that happened along the way or when you were younger that, it helped shape the leader that you are today?
Okay, so I'll tell one from my childhood, and then I'll give one example from Goldman. I was just talking to my mom about this recently, so bear with me for a second. But when I was a very earnest elementary schooler, I was in a Girl Scout troop, and I was in this little town in New Jersey, and there are 2 Girl Scout troops, and all of my friends were in the other troop across town. And this goes back to our earlier conversation about agency and friction in kids' lives. So I come home to my mom, and from my time at school, I realized I wanted to move from troop 234 to troop 437. And I told her, I said, I want to be in the Girl Scout troop with all of my friends. And my mom like still runs that town. She's now the president of the town council there. She's an elected official. And so she obviously could have fixed this for me, right? In retrospect, I didn't know that at the time, but like she could have just made a call and make that happen. But she said, wow, I understand that. So what are you going to do about it? And I was like, oh, okay, so I have to figure this out with the limited resources I have. And my answer was, I wrote a letter in pencil on this paper to the troop leader across town and said, my name's Katie Koch. I earn all of these badges. I will show up for every meeting. I will do a great job. I will adhere to the Girl Scout honor or whatever else it is I said. And then at the end of the letter, I wrote, and P.S., if you let me in, my mom will be cookie mom for life. But it was kind of like my first deal, right? Like I wanted something and I had to figure out how to go about it with the resources I have. That's what I did. I put it in the mail. The troop leader I still know, and she kept it, and we talked about it. Yeah. And I think about that a lot with our kids because, you know, you and I are in the position, and your clients all are, to make life very easy for them. And that goes back to like, actually, people have to struggle a little bit. And this is a very small struggle, obviously, and there are larger struggles. But to deal with the big struggles in life, which you and I have both had too, you have to kind of have gone through some small struggles first.
Yeah.
So on Goldman, when I thought I was a hotshot executive at some point, I was in London, so this would have been, it's probably managing director. No. I know I was a vice president because that's part of the story. So I was a vice president, a senior one in London, and I was having my performance review, and those happened before you found out about promotions. And I had an amazing year. I mean, I exceeded every target they set for me. So I was so excited, and I wanted to go into the meeting and learn exactly how much money they were going to be paying me and be told about my promotion. So that was my mindset going into the meeting. Because when you put a target in front of me, I like to exceed it, and I did it. So go into this meeting. And the manager started, who's someone I'm still in touch with today, started the meeting by saying, how do you think this year went? And I was like, it was outstanding. I exceeded every target. It was the best year I've had yet. And he was like, okay, we promoted you to manage people last year, right? I was like, yeah. And he said, okay, so actually part of your job is to maximize their output too. And how do you think you did on that? And I said, well, together, I guess we achieved these targets. And he was like, you have to actually be able to lead people, and not all of them achieve their targets. So when we put you into this position, you're supposed to be a force multiplier. And he used that term, and it really stuck with me. Like, you are supposed to make the people around you better. And I don't think you've done that. And that's the job. And I walked away, and I was very crushed because this was I really did think I was going to get the promotion. And honestly, I wasn't used to, for a while, that much direct and tough feedback. And I went home and I thought about it for a day or two, and I really wanted to be great. And so I went back in and I sat down and I had a good conversation about what that looked like and how do I get more out of people and why it's important for Goldman Sachs not to just get maximum productivity for me, but from the people on my team. And I took that away, and that was the year I really learned how to manage people. And I also learned that I loved it.
That is a great story.
Yeah.
I mean, he really did you a favor, too.
Yeah, and by the way, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was going to say, when I got this job, he wrote me an email, and it had only one thing, which was in the subject line, which was force multiplier.
That is a fantastic story. And that was great advice he gave you.
Yeah.
And, when you have a great producer come in who's had a great personal year like you, the instinct in this industry, or any industry, is to not mess with that.
Yeah.
Right? To meet what you were expecting to hear in that meeting.
Yeah.
So that's great leadership to say, okay, that was important, but that wasn't all you did. That's a great story. That's a fantastic story. Let's transition a little bit to some of the macro issues you're dealing with.
Sure.
You're pushing the firm. It was already in alts, but you're pushing hard. Alts is obviously an incredible growth area.
Yeah.
So many different aspects of the business. And, in my career, private credit really didn't exist 10 or 12 years ago. And, now these firms are so huge. Infrastructure, the scale of it today, the secondary PE market, the primary PE market, it's incredible. So that's a big push for you. So talk about the trends in the industry and how you're trying to position TCW around that.
For your clients, I would say just starting very big picture on these trends. I'm going to start with equity markets for a second, because that was the place where I had the most experience and a lot of pattern recognition. And in fixed income markets, I would say we're at the really early stages of that happening, that the fixed income markets are getting more disrupted by private capital. Now, take private credit for a second, and there's lots of different types of private credit, but we'll focus on direct lending to companies. That started, as you well know, out of the financial crisis. So the reason that we have private credit, I'm sure this wasn't the intention, but when regulations were put in place that meant that banks could not warehouse these loans on their balance sheet, we had to come up with another solution for that. And that solution was private credit.
Market innovation. That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
And now we've transferred that risk into the private markets, and also the buyer demand had to be there. And there's many different types of buyers that buy private credit, including individuals. The one that's grown the most is insurance companies, because these can be structured as very attractive assets for insurance companies. And so that started to move more fixed income capacity from public into private markets. And then it's really just grown from there. Now we have asset-backed finance, which is private securitizations, and you can go down the line, and there's a lot more private availability of credit. And it's even more complicated in credit markets, because in the equity part of the capital structure, you're just choosing, am I going to be public or private, right? It's a binary decision. On the debt part of your capital structure, you can be public and private even in the same company. You can lend against corporate cash flow. You can lend against, which is what direct lending is largely, or you can lend against assets, which is what asset-backed finance is. So CFOs have a multitude of choices in which to finance themselves. And honestly, very big picture, I think this is great for America. I think it's one of the things that makes us competitive. We have innovative capital markets, a lot more tools to do the financing of our companies, and it should be great for your clients that can benefit from the wealth creation in America through equity markets, public and private, and through credit markets, public and private.
100%. And by the way, the growth of private alternatives for our clients, because our clients, as you know, are mostly high net worth and ultra high net worth, is significant. If you can withstand the illiquidity of some of these securities, you have to have we recommend a significant allocation for our clients of private equity-like and debt-like instruments. So there's a lot of it, across the industry.
And that, for your clients, that makes so much sense, because we live in you have a global allocation too, but just sticking on the U.S. for a second, which is the world's largest economy, you want to have exposure to this economy and its tremendous growth potential over decades, right? Because your clients are probably thinking in decades. So if you want to access that GDP effectively and all the things that can be created on the back of America, and that capacity now is migrating towards private markets, not just public markets, you really have to have exposure to both.
Yeah.
So that's true. And from an asset allocation perspective, I would say from an investing perspective, the thing that I think is really important for us as an asset manager is that we have to be relevant to the borrower. And you'll understand this from your days on Wall Street. These CFOs that we have great relationships with, they want us to be able to provide those flexible sources of financing, right? So in order for us to maintain those relationships and therefore to deliver returns for our clients, we have to have pools of capital in which we can lend in all of these different ways. So that's why I'm focused on this asset class, not just because I think it will grow. I do think that's true, and I think your clients should have exposure to it, but also I think it will allow us to stay on the leading edge as investors.
Really smart, because I think this is it's secular, and it's going in that direction, and I think it's important for TCW to be exactly where you just said.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's go back to mentorship. And I don't know whether there's one or two specific mentors along the way that you've had. And then any lessons that come out of the interaction with those individuals.
Sure. I mean, I've had so many great mentors over the course of my career. And I think even in this most recent phase, becoming a CEO, I've had the opportunity to really learn from a lot of other CEOs that I've just encountered in different aspects of my life. So I'll start with Goldman Sachs. So I most of my career was with two CEOs, Lloyd Blankfein and then David Solomon. And I'll start with Lloyd. So when I went out to lunch with Lloyd before I started this job at TCW, and I just asked him a whole bunch of questions, largely around management.
Because you'd kept in touch with him. He was no longer CEO.
Yes, right.
But you went to just say, hey, I'm thinking of taking this.
Yeah.
So before you took the job?
Actually, no, it was after I took the job, but while I was on garden leave.
Okay.
But of course, I stayed in touch with him because he's incredibly bright and smart.
Yeah, I knew him particularly well.
And he's funny.
He's a great sense of humor. Cutting sense of humor.
So I said to him, you managed all these super talented people, and there must have been moments where it was tough, and like where there might have been some toxicity on part of people, like they can be difficult to manage. They're not necessarily focused on the whole organization, whatever it might be. And I said, so how much talent, I asked him the question, how much toxicity effectively would you accept in return for outsized talent? And he said, I accepted various doses of that over the course of my career, and it always blew up on me, and it was always at the wrong time.
Wow, that's
so
interesting.
I would actually...
That's a great question you asked him, by the way, too. Yeah.
I would accept 0. That was his advice. So that's something that really stuck with me a lot. And then David Solomon, who's now running Goldman, a couple of things. The first that I really appreciate about him is that he was able to deliver really direct and impactful feedback, which is a gift. And rare, very rare. And I'll say, honestly, for a woman, I think it's super rare. They don't get enough of it. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But you have to really be able to react in a way that's just gratitude for feedback. So
it's probably a compliment to you that he was comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I would like to think that.
No, I think that is.
But he really was good at that and delivering it real time and with impact. And I will say that's something I've taken to TCW. When I sit down we didn't have intern classes before, now we do. And when I sit down with the interns, I always ask them the question, like, what is the answer when someone delivers you feedback? Maybe you agree with it, maybe you don't, but what's the answer? What's the right answer? There's only one answer. And the answer is, thank you. That's it.
That's great advice.
And then you go away and you can think about it. And if you truly think it's not relevant, like, you got to take a lot of time before you go back, because you're just going to be viewed as defensive if you say it in the moment. And so I appreciated that I got direct and candid feedback. I give myself credit for being able to take it in and not be defensive. And it makes you excellent. Like, you're not going to get excellent unless people are telling you really difficult truths about yourself that you have to work on. So I agree, I really valued that I got that, and it was a great gift. And on the way out, after I resigned,
what happened when you resigned? That'll be an interesting, yeah.
So
he obviously wasn't happy.
Yeah, they weren't super excited, I would say.
Well, that's a compliment again, yes.
But we had we had such good conversations, actually. And I'll say the other great part about him is that after this meeting, if I needed advice for something and I called there or showed up, they would respond. By they, I mean him and John, I would respond right away. And these are people you respect, you stay friends with for life. You're always doing business together. And, again, what another great gift. But in that kind of parting conversation, he gave me the advice, you're going to be leading a big, company now, and it's hard. And you worry too much what people think about you. And you can't be liked all the time. And wow. I mean, that was jarring to hear, right? But then again, I was able to say, thank you, which is the right response to it. And he's 100% right. You go on, you do. I didn't know that, right, at the time. I didn't really understand what he was saying to me because I hadn't had to do it at this level before. And now I realize, actually, you have to make a lot more tough decisions. And you have to make decisions that are long-term, that are in the interest of the client and the organization. Therefore, it means it's not going to be in the interest of every individual every time. And so you can't worry about being liked by people. I mean, you've got to be fair. You have to deal with integrity, all these shared values that you and I have, but you can't actually. I mean, I want you to reflect on that, but I've learned that you can't be liked.
100%. Well, these are great. Again, I think you've got a top 10 list in the making. There's a book or a podcast coming up, another podcast.
Yeah, down the road.
Yeah, well, you got a lot going on, but let's talk about the future then.
Sure.
Opportunities for the firm, for your clients. We talked about alts, but what's at the top of the list as you look out 5 or 10 years for TCW, which, by the way, under your leadership, if you go out even 5 years, it's a 60-year-old company, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Private. Aren't that many companies that stay private for 60 years? So what are the things that you see that will define TCW in 2030 and 2035 and farther out?
I want to start by saying one thing that I think is the most important that I keep in my mind every day is that we have to stay as an investment-led firm. And I want to explain what that means, and then I'll answer the question of how I think we have to evolve. But when you're in the business of asset management, we are in the business of generating returns for clients. This sounds pedantic, but if you focus too much on, this is actually an interesting industry in that we can't be Amazon, to go back to that. And sometimes growth ambitions can be actually inversely correlated with the returns that you want to deliver for clients, if that makes sense. we have to stay investment-led, investment culture. Just because we say this all the time, just because we can launch a product successfully and raise money doesn't mean we should. Like, we need to do things that make sense for our clients and that are focused on our main goal here, which is their long-term wealth creation. So I have to keep that at the center of everything we do. So when you ask me what's going to be in 10 years, my greatest hope is that people will say, this is an investment-led organization that's focused on its clients. Because if we lose that, there is no next 10 years. So that's something I try and come in and we talk about as a team every day. And then, of course, like any organization, we have ambitions to deliver more for our clients, to do different things. And I think we're going to continue to have our great fixed income and equities business that we have currently. We've already evolved them quite a bit into different structures and different capabilities beyond in fixed income. Core Plus, for example, we've had many offerings beyond that. We've moved into active ETFs, which is a better wrapper for a lot of our individual clients. And in the equities business, we have a good track record of moving beyond the broad market to do thematic implementation for clients, which I think is going to continue to be important. So, for example, we launched an AI fund 10 years ago. So not just with when ChatGPT became popular, it's been a great wealth creator. And we have power, which, by the way, I think is going to be one of the biggest themes in the world and certainly the U.S.
It's unbelievable how it's front and center now, tied to AI.
Yeah.
It's just massive.
By the way, Andy Jassy also said, because I asked him that question because I want to be aligned with what these companies are doing from an investment perspective. And he said that he thinks that that will remain constrained for many years to come. So whenever you have an industry that goes from, actually power was below, it was pretty much flat. It was below GDP growth. And you can make a projection that you're going to go above GDP growth. That's when you get this opportunity to capture a lot outsized value. And we're at that place with power now. AI is part of that story, but it's actually not all of it. It's also because we're reshoring manufacturing and EVs, and it's the coinciding of all of that demand that's putting pressure on power in the U.S., and we have to transform the power system. And that's a very strong investment thesis we have across the platform, and one going back to the equity business that we're capturing in an active ETF. So we've already done, some diversification and some modernization of these platforms, which we'll continue to do over the next 10 years. Alternatives is going to be a much bigger part of our business, just like it's going to be a larger part of your clients' portfolios. Those
are hand in glove.
Yeah, those are
we're
related.
Putting our clients in alternative strategies that managers like TCW are doing.
Yeah, and those alternatives are going to go from a tactical yield play to a core part of portfolios.
I think so too.
Really believe that, and so that'll be by definition a bigger part of our business. And then I would say we're also just on delivery of all of these things. We're going to focus on digitalization, and we don't have to go into great detail on that. But I do think that there is a future world in which some of these assets can be tokenized and bought and sold in different ways that we're spending some time on too.
Yeah, it's a great list. I think you're on a lot of great themes there. Well, let's shift and we can kind of go to wrap on the Katie Koch personal side. So,
okay.
And I want to make sure I talk about Notre Dame, but before we go to Notre Dame, you've got a lot going on in running TCW and 4 children under the age of 11 and a husband.
Yeah.
How do you make all of that work? And what are the days like? What are the weekends like?
What I would say is this. It's hard to do this, but I want people, if they're listening to this, particularly women, to know that it is really possible to do these things. Like it is possible to have a very demanding career, and also, I mean, you know this, but I think I really want this message to everyone, but to women, to have this very demanding career and also a family that's a source of renewal and joy for you. You just have to be really intentional and really deliberate about it. And I read this essay every year by Clay Christensen, which is How Do You Measure Your Life, which anyone can find right now if you Google it. And the main message of that is just being very intentional about what's important to you and keep reminding yourself about that. And so for me, that is my family. It is the 4 kids and the husband.
Yes, he's going to watch this. He's definitely going to be like, wait.
It will be, my husband and the 4 kids. It's all of them together. And you have to remind yourself about that because you've raised kids too. And the reason I say you have to keep reminding yourself is like, it's not easy every day to be a parent. And there is friction in that relationship. And I don't know about your kids, but they don't do everything I tell them to do. And a lot of
mine don't. I've just gotten used to it because I'm ahead of you on the scale, but they certainly don't.
And so like, you don't get immediate gratification from every interaction with your children. and telling them no is hard and all these things we talked about before. But you hope that, it's the ultimate long-term form of investing in the future that will continue to pay off. And therefore, you have to really focus on being there with them. Whereas with work, it's so easy to get seduced back into work when I come home because there's an email, I can respond. You get the dopamine of like, I've driven something forward with immediate, with an immediate impact. And a lot of the people there do listen to me, unlike at home. So so it's a little, in some ways it's easier to get pulled into that, but that is why you have to be intentional about putting them first. Talking about other great leaders, something Jamie Dimon said before that I was lucky to hear early and really have held with me is that don't go around saying that it's just about quality of time, because you can't have quality of time with people you love unless you have some quantity of time with them. So that's another reason to really be deliberate at putting them first. And I wouldn't say like I get it right every day. Obviously, I'm in New York now. My family's in LA. So this week I'm away for a few days, but I really try and check in and I try and get it right over time. So
I think that's a great philosophy. And look, I'm ahead of you, so I can tell you that as long as you do that, but it requires that. And I actually had somebody who's writing a book and just interviewed me about life as an investment banker for all these years. And I told him that the only way that I was, because of the challenges of the job, the only thing that I could put at the same level and even above it was my family.
Yeah.
So there are other things that you do sacrifice if you're going to do a job like yours and have a family like yours. But you can do both of these things. Yeah. But you have to be very intentional, and there has to be a lot of time.
Yeah.
I remember, I used to drop my kids in elementary school. I would make sure I dropped them at school one day a week. And I remember there were times when I worked for the CEO and he was calling, he's like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm dropping the kids, I'll call you in 45 minutes. And there was a something called lunch bunch where a parent could go, and I would go. And I remember one of my wife's friends was telling her husband, "If Greg Fleming can go to that lunch bunch occasionally, you can go." And the guy comes up to me. No, on a Friday night, he comes up to me at some cocktail party. He's like, "You're making my life more difficult." And I said to him, "I think there's a day when you're going to thank me for having put you in that position." But I was incredibly intentional, but I never became a good golfer. There's lots of things you don't do if you're going to be intentional about both of those things. Yeah. So, but I think you've got it, 'cause, but it's really hard to run.
I am trying to learn how to play golf, actually.
It's time consuming.
It takes a lot of.
Lions will help you with that.
Yeah. Does he?
He's okay, but his son is fantastic.
Of course, you have to have things that you try and do with your family or friends to have some renewal outside of these demanding jobs.
There has to be some things for Katie Koch as well.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to thank you for being here. This was unbelievable.
It's my absolute pleasure.
They are lucky to have you as the leader there.
Thank you.
And you're going to have an incredible career from here. Thank you, Katie, for sharing your incredible journey, insights, and experiences with us today. I look forward to seeing the continued evolution of TCW under your leadership and the positive impact you will undoubtedly make in the industry. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of The Blueprint. And we hope you'll take time to visit our growing library of insights from those building and leading remarkable American brands and businesses. Many thanks and all the best.